Today, we turn our attention westward, always westward, to one of the most astonishing episodes in human history, the settlement of the American frontier during the Gilded Age, roughly from 1870 to 1900. This is the period when the United States did something no other nation had ever done quite so fast: populate, exploit, connect, and govern an entire continental interior in a single generation. What took Rome centuries and Russia half a millennium, Americans did in about 30 years with bad maps, worse weather, and a government that mostly shrugged and said, "Good luck." Today, I want to focus on three pillars of that expansion. 1. The settlement of the Great American Plains. 2. The silver rushes of the Rocky Mountains. 3. The railroad as the great engine of Western expansion. Along the way, we'll dispense with a few myths, admire some hard truths, and give credit where credit is due. Let's begin with the Great Plains, a region that early Americans regarded with all the enthusiasm of a dentist's waiting room. Before the Civil War, maps labeled this region the Great American Desert. Not because it was technically a desert, but because it lacked trees, towns, and anything that made 19th century Americans comfortable. No forests meant no lumber. No rivers meant no easy transportation. And no familiar landmarks meant fear. One Army officer famously wrote that the plains were unfit for cultivation and uninhabitable by a people depending upon agriculture. This is one of those quotes historians treasure because it is spectacularly wrong. The turning point comes with the Homestead Act of 1862, which truly comes into its own after the Civil War. For the price of filing paperwork and 5 years of residence, a family could claim 160 acres of land. Now pause and appreciate this. The federal government was essentially saying, "Here, have land, don't die. Please vote Republican." Between 1870 and 1900, millions of settlers, farmers, immigrants, former soldiers poured onto the plains. Kansas, Nebraska, the Dakotas, and parts of Texas and Oklahoma filled with farms almost overnight. What changed? 3 critical innovations. 1. Steel plows, thank you John Deere, that could cut through tough prairie sod. 2. Barbed wire, which solved the ancient problem of fencing land where trees do not exist. 3. Dry farming techniques, which made agriculture possible with limited rainfall. Add to this the windmill, one of the unsung heroes of American history, and suddenly the plains were not a desert, but a food factory. By 1900, the United States was exporting grain to Europe at an industrial scale. The plains became the breadbasket of the world, feeding industrial cities at home and hungry populations abroad. Or as one farmer put it, we didn't conquer the land, we learned how to work with it. If the plains were settled with plows and patience, the Rocky Mountains were settled with picks, dynamite, and optimism, bordering on insanity. While the California gold rush peaked earlier, the Gilded Age belonged to silver. Major strikes included the Comstock Lode in Nevada, 1859, but economically dominant later; Leadville, Colorado, 1877; Cripple Creek, Colorado, 1890s. These discoveries triggered silver rushes that created towns almost overnight. Leadville went from a campsite to a city of 30,000 people faster than most of you finished high school and is now home to one of the most challenging ultramarathon. Mark Twain, who had a talent for being broke in interesting places, described these mining towns as a combination of gambling hall, saloon, courthouse, and madhouse. He was not wrong. What's important here is that mining during the Gilded Age was not just about lone prospectors. It quickly became industrialized. Large corporations replaced individual miners. Eastern and European capital financed deep shaft mining. Railroads hauled ore to smelters hundreds of miles away. This was capitalism with dirt under its fingernails. The wealth extracted from the Rockies helped fuel industrial growth, urban development, the expansion of American currency debates. Yes, silver leads us straight into the free silver movement, but that's another lecture. Mining towns were rough, unequal, and unstable, but they were also engines of growth, tying the West firmly to the national economy. Now we come to the true hero of today's story, the railroad. If westward expansion were a body, the railroad was the spine. Completed in 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad cut travel time across the continent from months to days. But the real story is what followed. By 1900, the United States had laid over 190,000 miles of track. Railroads determined where towns would exist, set prices for farmers, created national markets, enabled mass migration. Where the tracks went, people followed. Where they didn't, towns withered. A Western saying captured it perfectly. A town without a railroad is a town without a future. Railroads didn't just move people, they sold the West. Railroad companies advertised farmland in Europe, offering pamphlets in German, Swedish, and Czech. Immigrants arrived directly onto the plains, stepped off the train, and became Americans by planting wheat. Railroads also made plains farming profitable by allowing crops to reach eastern and global markets. Without rail transport, wheat rots. With it, wheat builds cities. Yes, railroads were subsidized. Yes, they were sometimes corrupt, but they worked. Or as historian Richard White bluntly put it, railroads made modern America possible, often in ways Americans later pretended were accidental. Now let me step back and emphasize what should genuinely amaze us. Between 1870 and 1900, the frontier line vanished. New states entered the Union. Millions of acres were settled. Entire economies sprang into existence. Frederick Jackson Turner famously declared in 1893 that the frontier was closed. Whether or not he was right philosophically, he was correct practically. The map was full. This was not gentle. It was not orderly. It was not fair to everyone involved. But it was extraordinarily fast, and it reflected something deeply American. A belief in opportunity, a willingness to take risk, an almost reckless confidence that tomorrow would be better than today. Or, as one homesteader wrote in his diary, "The land is hard, the wind is cruel, and the neighbors are far away, but it is ours." I'll close with this. We should not romanticize the frontier. It involved hardship, displacement, and failure, as well as success. But neither should we diminish what was accomplished. In the space of one generation, Americans turned grasslands into farms, mountains into industrial centers, rail lines into national unity. The settlement of the West during the Gilded Age was not perfect, but it was astonishing. And if nothing else, it proves this enduring truth about American history. We argue about how we got there, but we always manage to get there faster than anyone expects. Thank you.